Hi, today I'll be coding a solution to this challenge, that is, get this result using a single element, no pseudos, no JS, no SVG, no images in general, save for at most 2 CSS gradients, and at most 3 CSS declarations, not including width and height, so 5 in total with those. One more thing I want to point out, this is not an optical illusion. The top of these disks is really darker than the bottom, and I'm going to show you the picker, right? So at the top we have 5.3 for all 3 channels. And at the bottom we have AD for all 3 channels. So the top of these disks is really darker than the bottom. Now let's move on to the code. We already have our div, we have width and a height set on it, so we're going to move straight to the background, and we're going to start with a linear gradient going from white at the top to black at the bottom, and then we're going to add those 2 disks using a radial gradient, which is going to go from white up to 50%, and we're going to have no, that's not what I meant. I cannot type. Okay, so here we're not going to want to have an oval, we're going to have 2 disks, so that means 2 repetitions of the background, which means that the background size horizontally needs to be half the width. So half the width is going to mean 50%, and here we're also going to add that vertically we use 100% of the height, because Safari might have issues without that. Yeah, I wish I didn't have to write that, but yeah, it is what it is. And one more thing I wish I didn't have to do is fix those jagged edges. And the way we do that is by adding a 1 pixel transition in between the white and the transparent. So we're going to have calc 50% plus 1 pixel. And now we have those smooth edges. Now the next step is going to be get that dark gray to lighter gray gradient all across the disks, and we're going to do that using blending. So we're going to have background blend mode, and the blend mode that we're going to use is one that I actually wrote an article about. Difference. Exclusion is also discussed here, but yeah, it's not relevant for this demo in particular. So now let's go and see what happens when we use the difference blend mode, and one of the layers is white. So you can see here we have this white layer, and here we have this gradient which is almost white at that point. Now in this case you can see how the layers are separated. We have the top layer and the bottom layer. But if we change things and we make them overlap and blend, then this middle part where we have one of the layers white, you can see how that part of the gradient that was almost white, here it's almost black, and that is because if one layer is white, then the resulting layer of blending using the difference blend mode is going to be identical to the other layer inverted. So all the mathematical computations behind this, the whole reasoning, is explained in this article, and I'm not going to go through it, but I am going to link to the article and you can go check it out. But basically this is the idea. A white layer is going to invert the other layer. Now here we have a light gray underneath the white, right? So white is going to invert it, and we're going to have a dark gray. Here we have a dark gray underneath the white. The white is going to invert it, and we're going to get a light gray. So let me just write that. Okay, but one thing you can note here is that the difference between the top and the bottom, you know, both overall and inside the disks, is less extreme here. So here we go straight from white to black, and here this gray is darker than we wanted. So we need to decrease those differences, and we're going to do that with a filter, with a contrast filter. So let me just show you here. This is a slide from a talk that I gave, and again the slideshow is going to be linked in the description, but be aware that it may only work in Chromium and it's going to take a bit to load. But yeah, so contrast values that are smaller than 1 or 100% are going to push RGB channels the middle of the 0 to 155 interval. So it's going to push the 0 of the black is going to get pushed up towards the middle of the interval, and the 255 of the white is going to get pushed down towards the middle of the interval. Let me just show you. So you can see how we don't have white there anymore. We have a light gray, and there we have a dark gray. And if we keep decreasing the contrast, eventually we're going to get the same gray everywhere, which is not what we want in this case. So let's say that we're going to stop midway to 50% or 0.5, right? So 0.5. And this is the result we wanted. And now I want to answer a question. Why no pseudos? Why not just use pseudo elements for those disks? Well, because sometimes we can't. Sometimes we need to get this effect on a pseudo element itself. So for example, let's say we want to have a range input like the one right here. The thumb itself is a pseudo element. We can't add pseudos on it. It's not going to work. What we can do, however, is use this difference technique and also the contrast thing, or another technique that I like to use is layering a semi-transparent layer on top. So just adding a semi-transparent layer on top with a normal blend mode. Okay, let's bump up. So just zoom up, and here I'm going to decrease the font because it's zoomed anyway, right? So it looks something like this. Now you can see the thumb better, and you can see the effect obtained there. Now if I just remove this layer and remove that top blend mode, now you can see it, right? So you can see how we go from white to black, and there we have much bigger difference between the top of the disk and the bottom. And now if we revert and we add that semi-transparent white on top, you can see how we get something much nicer. And I find that this is easier and more flexible because at the end of the day, this is a linear gradient, so we can have different grays, we can have different alphas in different areas of the element, you know, to get more complex effects. And I just find it easier to compute. Of course, we can compute the result, so, and we can reverse, we can get from a certain result that we want, we can get the contrast value, because basically the contrast, if we go here to the contrast filter, it shows the SVG equivalent, which basically gives us how the resulting RGB channels after applying the contrast filter are computed. And in turn, if we know those resulting RGB channels that we want to get as the result, we can compute the contrast value. But I just find that a bit clunkier than computing the result with a semi-transparent layer on top, which is something that I also detailed in an article, Adventures in CSS Semi-Transparency Land. Basically, for each of the channels, RGB, so we have the channel of the bottom layer, right, plus the difference between the channel of the top layer minus the channel of the bottom layer, multiplied with the alpha of the top layer. This is going to give us the resulting channel, right? So this is no blending. This is just one semi-transparent layer on top of another, right? Which in our case is going to be the result of blending. So this is how we get this much lighter thumb right there. So we can use these computations to get a certain result, a certain exact result. And I find that it's a lot easier with the semi-transparent layer, but you know, often sometimes you don't want an extra layer and a contrast filter is enough. Yeah, for those cases it works like that as well. But anyway, these are the two options of changing from the very rough result that we have just by using a difference blend mode, right? This looks much nicer. So yeah, I'm not going to keep on talking any longer. I'm going to end it here. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you like the work that I'm putting out since early 2012, it's already more than 10 years now, and you want me to be able to do more in the future, please consider supporting it. You can do so by being a cool cat and becoming a patron on Patreon, or if monthly support is not your style, there's the option of a one-time donation. Or you could at least share this to show what can be done with CSS these days, because honestly, I think it's pretty damn cool. In any event, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!